When private equity firms are investing in new companies, they typically are looking for value creation. However, many of them end up with value destruction. I'll explain why today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And most of the clients that we work with, not all of them, but most of them are owned by private equity firms, or they have a significant private equity stake. And when these private equity firms are investing in these portfolio companies, they typically want to see value creation. They bought the company because they saw an opportunity to create value, sell the company at some point in the future for higher than what they paid for it. However, most organizations and most PE firms experience the opposite. In fact, data shows that companies that are successful in their digital transformations can increase EBITDA by 10 to 15%. However, 80% or more of digital transformations completely fail. So what's the disconnect? Why are so many organizations striving for value creation, but yet so many end up destroying value? So what I want to do today is dive into what the causes of value destruction are, and to share with you some tips on how to avoid those common pitfalls that a lot of PE firms oftentimes fall into with their portfolio companies. Now, if you'd like to learn more about the things you should be thinking about as a private equity or private equity-backed organization going through a digital transformation, I encourage you to download and read our private equity playbook, which you can find right here by scanning the QR code or go to the links below. The first factor and variable that undermines the goal of value creation in a private equity digital transformation is the money pit that goes along with the digital transformation. Too often these large complex projects become even larger and more complex than they need to be. They become bloated, they become mismanaged, they become misaligned with the goals of the organization, and it creates a lot of problems that create a lot of overruns. It's well over 80% of organizations spend a lot more money than they expect on their implementations, which is the exact opposite of what the average private equity investor wants. They want to try and maximize value for the lowest cost possible, but what ends up happening with most digital transformations is they deliver very little value at the highest cost possible. And so what we need to do is flip that script and flip the math behind that to make it more palatable and more manageable. Now, I'm going to share with you some tips at the end of this video on how to do that, but just to summarize a couple of them here before I get to that. One would be to make sure you've got the right project governance and controls in place to ensure that you identify red flags and risks and problems, and you fix those and attack them before they become even bigger money pits. Second of all is to make sure that you have a digital strategy that's aligned with your goals and expectations as a private equity investor, as well as the goals and expectations of the organization itself. And then third is to have someone who's a tech-agnostic, independent technology provider that can help you through the process in a way that's not designed to sell you more software, but instead is designed to save you money and time and increase the value of your implementation. Now, many of you watching may be concerned with the initial implementation costs, which is a very real concern. You should be concerned about that, and you should want to manage and optimize those implementation costs, but that's not where the real cost risk is. The real risk is the operational disruption that comes along with most digital transformations. Our research shows that just over 50% of organizations that go live with new technology experience some sort of material operational disruption at the time of going live with new technology. So in other words, they're not able to ship product. They're not able to take orders from their customers. They're not able to close the books. They're not able to run payroll. Those are very big, significant disruptions, not only to the operations, but to the cost profile of your project. Not only are you not realizing the value that you could be realizing on the project, but you're actually bleeding money. You're actually destroying business value at this point. So we've got to figure out how can we ensure that we mitigate risk and not only save money during the implementation, but more importantly, how do we mitigate risk and save money post-implementation so that we can be thinking about how to optimize money, how to create value, and how to get a maximum ROI on that investment in new technology. Now, I'm going to share with you in the next segment how to do that, but the key here is to make sure that you have an objective and independent party guiding you through the process so that you identify what the risks are and you are aware of where the potential impacts might be so that you can make an informed decision as an investor in the company on what it's going to take to be successful with that project. Companies like mine at Third Stage Consulting can provide that sort of service. We do this all the time for private equity-backed organizations, and we do it for a lot of private equity firms and their multiple portfolio accounts. So that's what you want, and what you need is that sort of independent and objective guidance to help you make sure that you're not running into operational disruption and that you're not just throwing technology at the problem and hoping that it sticks and creates value. So I've shared with you some of the ways that private equity-backed firms oftentimes unintentionally destroy value rather than create it. But what can you do to transform value destruction back into value creation, which I assume is what you're looking for in the first place? Well, first of all, you want to make sure that your digital strategy and roadmap is aligned with your goals and with the portfolio company's goals. Too often we see strategies that just don't make sense for what the organization is trying to accomplish. For example, if you're a mid-cap private equity firm and you've bought a mid-sized company, and you're looking to flip that company in 3 to 5 years, and your goal is just to put in some simple automation to get some immediate value with the assumption that the buyer of that company in the future will put in their own ERP system, then why would you go implement a big, massive, complex system like an SAP or an Oracle, or something that's more likely to get ripped out and replaced by something else, and something that's more likely to destroy value in the short term? Instead, a more nimble, a lighter technology touch might make more sense in that case. This is just one example of how you want to make sure that your digital strategy is aligned with what it is you're trying to accomplish as an organization. The second thing you can do is make sure that you're not just focusing on short-term value, but more importantly, you're focusing on long-term value. Too often we work with private equity firms that are looking to really optimize short-term cost and value, but they aren't thinking as much about the long-term value. And I understand it's a balancing act because it depends on how long you're going to hold the asset. If you're only going to hold it for a year or two, of course, you're going to be a little bit more short-term focused. But most private equity firms we work with are holding an asset for at least 3 to 5 years. And what we don't want to see happen is that you optimize costs in year 1, but then costs spiral out of control in years 2, 3, and 4 because you didn't deploy technology correctly and actually ended up hurting the operations and the EBITDA of the business that you're trying to create value in. Third is to identify and contain and address the risks throughout the project. Too often private equity firms trust their portfolio company and the outside consultants just to make the project work, to make sure that the costs are optimized. But what a lot of private equity firms don't realize is that most consultants in the ERP and technology space are aligned with and partnering with software vendors. So their job is to implement as much software as possible because they make money the more software you implement. And to some degree that might be helpful to you, but to some degree it may also actually hurt you and create unnecessary cost and complexity and risk for your organization. So the key here is to recognize that you need to find the right partners that are not necessarily going to sell you software, but ideally, if you find a company like Third Stage Consulting, our company, that can provide tech-agnostic advice to help you keep things on track, short-term and long-term, that's going to benefit you more than an organization that's trying to push more software down your throat. And then last but not least, you want to make sure that you are focusing not just on technology, but more important, you're focusing on the operational and organizational side of things. With private equity firms, our team is a lot more likely to use technology more sparingly and more selectively, more strategically, rather than just trying to boil the ocean and put in a bunch of new technology. Instead, what we'll do is pick out the highest value areas and deploy technology to tackle those areas, not the entire operations necessarily. Especially if you're looking at a short to medium term hold on this asset, there's no point in taking on that risk and that cost profile, especially with uncertain business value on the other side. So if you can get immediate value, low-hanging fruit, and create value with less technology, that's typically going to be a lot higher ROI and affect your EBITDA in a more positive way than if you try to deploy more technology for technology's sake. So these are just a few of the tips and lessons we've learned from working with private equity firms and private equity-backed organizations. If you're a private equity firm and you'd like to learn more about how we can help you, please feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can reach out. We're happy to discuss ideas with you, informally brainstorm ideas on how your portfolio companies might leverage technology in a way that makes more sense for your organization and actually creates value rather than destroys it. And if you'd like to learn even more, feel free to read our private equity playbook, which you can find right here by scanning the QR code, or you can go to the links below. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day.